Hello. So we are back with another Ford Carfax binder. Um, Usually these are called Ford Fax books, as you can see here, but that does vary a little bit by car or by year. You can see 1981, 1982, they kind of had their own thing going. But then for 1980, all the way back to when they first started doing the binders, which was 1973-ish, somewhere in the early 70s, they all kind of looked identical to this. So then on a shelf, they'd all look uniformly the same, more or less identical, aside from obviously the different years distinguished. But for 82, they stirred the pot a little bit. They still look decent on a shelf together. And then after that, things get a little wild. 83 book looks pretty awesome, but it definitely stands out by itself. Everything from that point forward just got a lot more monochrome. I've seen the 84 and 85 books. They are the same exact style of this 86. Like literally the same style, just different colors. One was more charcoal with cream or gray lettering, and then the other one I think was like a bright silver with black lettering, I think. 84 and 85 are the two binders that I'm looking for right now. They're the only ones I don't have to complete this collection, and they're quite difficult to get a hold of. And the few I see, people are asking crazy amounts of money for them. Well, I get that if they're rare, but really, what is the demand? Anywho, so been slowly acquiring these, and they've just been awesome. And that's what I'm making these video for, so that you don't have to hunt these down. Whatever you are hoping to get out of these, you could probably see through my videos. Well, assuming you're an Escort or EXP guy at least. So that's how this works. I give a brief overview of these because you could own some other Ford and you're interested in these, so that you can see all the data regarding those or the comparable cars at the time. But for us in particular, this is the meat and greet. I should say meat and beans of these books is what's in there for our cars. There's not much out there for I should say database resources for the Escorts and EXPs. There's plenty for the Mustangs, and that's well known. Same with the Broncos, and I think the other Ford pickups. Plenty of information out there. Everything you'd find in these, more or less. But for our cars, not so much. These are the only books that show the interior color codes and then what interior colors were available with exterior colors. And then depending on those two will dictate what pinstripe is on your car. And then these have listed out every single actual option that you could have on each of these cars, depending on the trim, and every single standard feature for each of the trims and a good comparison of each. All of those are great things that you can find some related info inside the sales brochures. Like the sales brochure for an 84 Escort. You can find some of that in there, but it's not the end all be all. As with those, you find out, well, okay, yeah, some of these options were removed as options. Some of them were standardized, and some of them didn't even make it into the car. So there is variance with those because the brochures they print out before even these. So the sales brochures will have a number of revisions throughout their the course in time. These binders, not so much. Most of these, they have 0 or 1 revision in them. That's it. For the most part, they have 0. Because they, like I said, they're made after the sales brochures. So at that point in time, Ford is gone. Yeah, we're definitely not going to have this option after all. The market research shows it's not necessary, and the product development team, they show that it's going to cost extra money to have this other option. So we're just going to hold out on those. And we are thinking about changing out this gear ratio, but that might be a later thing. So let's just push these out for now. This is what the customer can order. Anyone can order this. There will be no limitations, no limited quantities or availabilities. It's just anyone in the world can have these offerings right here, right now, any time of the year. And then they put that into print. It shows up in these books, and then the rest is history. So the 1981 book is kind of interesting. It has its own separate tab for the Carfax section. And then going down, it has its own separate tab for competitive comparison. And then a little further down, a separate tab for fax bulletins and other literatures. So I think this binder would technically be more complete than the other ones. Judging off of my other books, this would be more like the Advanced Edition or the Special Edition. We do have one of those in Mercury form over here for 1982. That guy. So that could be what this is. Otherwise, all the 81 binders might just be this. And I haven't seen any of the 70s binders in person to know. Otherwise, those could be exactly like this. Maybe they just yank some of this info and put them into different binders, because I know come 82 or 83, one of those 2 years, they had all of this info would actually be in its own binder. The Thorough Competitive Comparisons would have its own binder. Same thing for some of this stuff, but you'll see a lot of these tabs at the final section are empty. They allow for revisions and updates to be added, and this one lacks those. But should I acquire them, that's where they go. I happen to run across a bunch for 82, 83, 84, and 85. So I've distributed them within the two binders I have. I don't have 84 and 85, but when I do, I have a lot of revisions to stuff in the 84 and 85 books, along with some ordering sheets, which will make things pretty interesting. It'll fill these up, and by accounts, it's going to empty out other space on my shelf, so I'm excited about that. So anywho, this is how it starts out. Just goes from the top. So these are more or less just more standout items. I guess this is kind of like an index, kind of. Just a lot of odds and ends. So if you're looking for anything in particular, they'll tell you where to find it towards the end of the book, and then from there you can figure out which car department you want to be looking in. But general information starts out usually all of these books, and it tells you how to use the binder as you need it. Yeah, you can see update revision is a 1 of 81. So this one's pretty late in the game. So basically goes over everything, and we'll gloss over some of the stuff. They do have a reference card, so if you're looking for a particular car size or door count or engine size, anything like that, you can usually refer to this table. Say, well, I don't need a tow with my car, and I'm needing something that I can comfortably fit 2 kids in until they reach high school, and something that's good on gas. Well, let's go through the list. Escort would definitely fit the bill. Mustang is a hard maybe. You could probably get away with a Fairmont. And then the other ones, not going to be too great on gas. Things like that. And then once you narrow down which car you're after, you can then pull open each tab, review the trims and some of the other more detailed specifications. And then there's a standard glossary, so you know what kind of terms for each, or what kind of parts for each terms they're talking about. There's warranty codes. There is a decoder for axle codes in here as well. That is handy. I did put this all into my database. Same with the entire VIN breakdown. So if you're looking to decode your VIN number, I do have that in my database. Free to view, shared Google Sheets document. Rough maintenance intervals, kind of shared across most of the cars. But you can see that each page is designated to a particular engine. Some safety features, locking steering column, the energy absorbing steering column, so it's designed to collapse should it hit your chest or something in the event of an accident. The back half of it is corrugated like drain tile tubing, so then that can compress like bellows. Brakes, more on the bumpers, some of the restraint systems. Yeah, the 15-mile-an-hour bumpers in these guys. Polygel mitigator bumper system. Yeah, they say hydraulic cylinder, but in my experience, it's widely known that they were supposed to be like gas shocks, but honestly, they're more like solid rubber, and I think that's because they start life as some sort of gel. That sounds right, but over time they harden, and it just becomes a rubber absorber, a rubber bump stop, if you will. Yep, cures into a jelly-like substance, and then 40 years later, not so much. So today, if you are relying on these, and you hit something at that, the 5 to 15 miles an hour, you can actually stuff those inside the car, and they won't pop back out. But sometimes they still do. It's really hit or miss. Anything can happen. They're 40 years old. And then some of these scary child seats of the time, extra ribbing and spinal protection inside doors. Yeah, they call them steel guardrails because that's literally what they are. They look exactly like that. You would, most compare them with, guardrails on roadsides. Some information on tires, which is no longer specific. Or I should say no longer relevant, as they were just implementing radials. Your spark electronic ignition. This is pretty interesting because this is specific to our cars, really. I believe this whole setup was used in an array of cars, but you will see it in almost all of ours. Some different body features. This is where Ford gets deep into aerodynamics. They started doing that with the EXP. We will see some of that in the 81 book. That's why we're here. And then after that, it wouldn't be until the development of the Taurus, where they actually do wind tunnel design, where they design cars based on how they perform in the wind tunnel. The EXP was more of a, let's make it look like this. And then they thought, you know, that looks pretty aerodynamic. Let's measure it and compare it to all of the other cars. And then they took all the other cars, measured those in the wind tunnel, and they were able to assign drag coefficient values to them. Whole bunch of info on towing. There's not much towing you can do with the Escort. You can see maximum ton weight is 100 pounds. And I believe that is because the factory hitch would just bolt on straight to the bumper, which is on those bumper shocks. So the most you could ever put on there is 100 pounds. So some kids standing on the bumper, yeah, that's about all they could take. Realistically, you could put 200 pounds on the bumper. Like, a grown adult can stand on the bumper, but you don't want that prolonged impact. That would be very bad. Then a maximum trailer weight 700 pounds. So roughly what, like 1/3 of the bump shocks capability, because they can withstand the impact of a 2,100 pound car, and they're rated to drag 700 pounds behind them. So that kind of tracks in line with everything else we've seen so far. Axles ratio, oh geez, yeah, you're gonna give them the really tall one? Good grief, that ain't right. But it does say minimum required equipment, so that is the tallest transmission, so you could tow with any of these technically. And then that concludes most of the general information. Now starts the individual tabs for each of these cars. So the EXP one is interesting. Remember that this is a 1981 book, and the EXP was a 1982 car. With that said, let's go to the top here. What's new for 82? Well, literally everything. This is a brand new car, and it says 82, so that's for next year anyways. But a lot of these were, so the first EXP had rolled off the line in February, I think 16th, 1981. So a short time after, whether it be a few weeks or a month or two, that they were actually sold to the public. So people had their hands on them in 1981. And as such, it is actually the first Ford to wear a blue oval since since a long time. I'm trying to think back when the one before that came. It was probably back in the 30s, maybe 40s. Long time. So what is new for 1982? Well, everything that's new for the Escort, really. The 1.6 2-valve hemispherical, 4-speed, fully synchronized transmission with overdrive, 4-wheel independent suspension. That was a big deal. Radial tires, whatever, halogen headlamps, whatever, fluid washer system, whatever, maintenance-free battery. So a lot of these things that are commonplace even just 5 years after this. Sport tuned exhaust for the manual transmission, pretty cool. Full instrumentation, yes. If you are unaware, there is some awesome instrumentation. Easily accessible mini fuse box, that's for sure. It's by the hood release. Manual rack and power steering. There is also a power option. We'll talk about that. Self-adjusting clutch, power front disc and rear drums. So all the EXPs have power, none have manual brakes. But with the Escort, you'll see some manual brake options. And then a lot of comfort features. 11-gallon fuel tank. The Escort would often only have the 10 for this year. 1981 digital clock. Aerodynamic body design. Here's some of the options. The 3-speed automatic. The third gear is 1-to-1. It's not overdrive even. Cruise control available. Premium sound available. Sunroof available. Performance suspension available and pretty hard to come by. Even more hard to come by, leather and shearling and leather seats. So here's a photo of one of those prototypes. And it is a prototype because these are not slots in the nose cone. That is either tape or paint on the nose cone. This is a prototype nose cone. When the first prototypes of these cars came out, the whole front nose was smooth, and there wasn't a Ford badge on the nose, but there was some giant crest right here in the center, and then off on one of the two corners it would have the four letters FORD, and then the hood would have two pretty awesome looking heat extractor vents there. But so this is the info that's inside the vent, actually. Or I'm sorry, this one is the 01, the body code 67D. That is the reference for the EXP body. This is particularly useful for the wiring diagrams, because in those it'll say in conjunction with 52D body, and I believe that is the Escort coupe. So that 3-digit code, it corresponds to the body within the platform. Come 1982, the Escort had added the 4-door body, so the Escort then had 3 bodies and the EXP. So in all the factory service literature, like the wiring diagrams, you would have those 4 body codes to distinguish between each. Major standard features, again, another prototype car. All more or less just common stuff for the EXP 82 at least. I'm not seeing anything that stands out. Well, I should say in conjunction with the other 82 information. But I do have that all right next to me, so after we flip through this, we'll go back through and compare. And like always, I do scroll through these slowly, so if you want to pause it and read it at any point in time, that is easy enough for you to do. Options list is nice and large. And you can see already they do have that 405 final drive option available already as of January 1981. That's a pretty rare option. Out of all my cars, I'm pretty sure I only have one, and it's my nice restored baby blue one I drive all the time. Some neat cutaways and illustrations of how some of the suspension, engine, and transmissions work. Yeah, the exhaust manifold is thin wall, but I wouldn't call it lightweight. If you change out the cast iron manifold for a tubular header, for getting the power gains, you drop enough weight to have a statistical advantage in any function, even just fuel economy. Some information on the self-adjusting clutch, some info on the different steering racks. And then here you go. Power front disc and power rear drums are standard on EXP. And they are self-adjusting, and they do have the diagonal split dual hydraulic brake system. So should you have issues in one corner, at least you still have 2 wheels to stop you with. And then some body construction. Some more detailed body construction. And from what I can tell, most of this is just copy and pasted into the 1982 book. And then it's a breakdown of the dashboard and components. And then soundproofing in particular. And then it talks about the cargo area. Aside from the wagon, the EXP has the largest cargo capacity in the back. You can actually see some of these specs side by side early on in one of the first graphs I showed you in the general info category. They do measure out some of the seat rooms, which is awesome. You can again compare those side by side with the Escorts, but the seats are more or less the same. What is different is the roof line is lower on the EXP, and as a result, they made the chair rails lower. But mechanically, they're identical. And the final information here, you can see actually each of the transmission ratios. Aha, there we go. Required for the high altitude package is the 405, but it is optional everywhere else. Extremely rare. More common is the 359 4-speed. Tire availability, there are some TRX options, and they list all of them. Before we go to the Escort section, let's just shoot these out back to back. 81, 82, so you can kind of see what differences there are. Again, the 82 book has one prototype, one not. One, well, I'm pretty sure it is still a prototype, but they went in after the fact and added the 2 strakes onto this otherwise identical photo. You can't fool the best. So that is just a prototype car with some editing in post. So this widely looks the same. What's new? Model availability. So this page got stuffed over here. That way they were able to move some of this blank space around and made the 82 book a little thinner. So if you do that everywhere you can for each of the car models, and there's like 14, you really thin things up. Standard equipment. This one doesn't do that. It goes into major standard features, and it lists out most of it. And then dives into the interior right away. This one, it doesn't have any of that. It goes from that quick overview we just had straight into the options chart. So we can probably skip ahead. Yep, there we go. So next page in our 81 book is what this says here. So page 6 versus page 4. But the info is entirely the same. It's all copy and paste on the left page. Same thing on the right. Except for some of these, being this one was printed for 82. By this point, the 405 was replaced with the 359 after 11 of 81. And then some disclaimer about high altitude emission cars that the 81 book does not have. And then our next page, I think, puts us towards the end of the EXP. Have to move this along to get it caught up. Here we go. Now we're kind of lined up again. So now we're at page 6 on the 82 book, page 15 in the 81 book. But it is all just copy and pasted. And then the final page for 81 should be the final page for 82. Just these two. And they are identical. They just use more print on this page so it looks less blank. But honestly, they could have squeezed it in there if they tried hard enough. Same thing said with that. And then boom, we're all caught up. So I'll set that to the side. We will check out the Escort comparison in a little bit here. So Escort, what's new for 81? Well, just like the EXP, literally everything. This is the first year for the Escort. Now, something to note. In a lot of literature, it says that there was a 1.3 available in the 81 Escorts. Whether you're looking at a Chilton's manual, a Haynes manual, or some of the Ford factory service manuals, it will occasionally reference a 1.3 in 81. We will find out digging through this, but that never ended up existing. As far as I can tell, I'd have to get a hold of Mahardy Auto Works and say, hey, how many cars do you show in 1981 with this engine digit? But they should reply a straight 0. But we will see what it says in here about that. What's new for 1981? Well, like I said, literally everything. So this is everything we mentioned. Yep, 11-gallon extended range. Extended range, you get 1 more gallon than the standard car has. And here's that 1981 Escort. It's a 1-year only car. It's the only year Escort to not have a blue oval, and the only year to have the world emblem on the quarter panel, or quarter panel fender. And then at this point in time, it's only 1981, so there are only 2 bodies. For 1982, they would add a third. It would be kind of a blend between these. It would be a 4-door hatchback. So coincidentally, it uses more or less the same doors. This top window frame for the back doors of the 4-door are different than the wagons, but they do use the same exact hatch as the 2-door. That's pretty interesting. And they share the same floor pans, all of these. So if you really had to, which I've had to, you can go and rebody these all onto the same bottoms. So body codes, yep, these I had mentioned before, and then the sedan is like, I'm pretty sure it was like 52D or something like that. Standard features on the base. Oh no, this is just for the body style. So right next to it is the wagon body style. I was looking at that too. Okay, so off to the left here, it talks about some of the interior and exterior options. So for the EXPs in 82, they were all black dashboards, but for the Escorts, from start to finish, 81 to 90, they were all color-coded to the rest of the car. Only if you had a performance model, whether it was the SS or the GT or the RS or anything like that. Those ones could be black, depending on the year, but almost all of them were color matched to the rest of the interior. If you have a blue interior, you get a blue dashboard. Standard features we won't worry too much about, but what we will spend some time on is the stuff involving the SS. Blackout treatment for front bumpers on all SS models. So as we see the SS stuff pop up, we will mention it, because the 81s are more or less just 82s, which are more or less 83s. Some options do come and go. Like as the years go on, they add a lot more interior options, a lot more convenience and mechanical options, more transmission options, more engine options, more handling package options. So now the wagon, again, it's all just the same stuff as the coupe. I don't know why they bothered listing anything different. So here's the trim. This is neat because you can actually shoot out each trim spec side by side. We will see 4 tabs here. There will be the L, which is practically the base car, the GL, which is 1 step above that. There is the JLX, and then the coveted SS. So with the L, this is how you'll usually see them equipped. The base bumpers will look as such. Base mirror, chrome shaver mirror. If you have an L, you could have a rubber insert in this blank spot of the bumper. You could also have black shaver mirrors on the doors instead of just chrome. It is possible I have those flipped around. Both of those are kind of rare sights. All of my cars so far have had adjustable mirrors. Interior black load floor mat, black lower back trim. So in the lowest level of cars, the entire back half of the car will pretty much be black. I think that's the same for up front. A base model car will have black carpet, and then the rest of the interior will be colored. For the GLs, we do get a little bit more fancy. You can see bumper extensions now, and I think these have a conglomerate mismatch parts. No, that's not a stripe, that's just the light hitting the bumper. Disregard. So now there's an added decorative stripe inside the bumper, and then the wheels I think get trim rings after this. Or no, I'm sorry, they had it before. The center caps are now bright and shiny versus these ones just being black. So you have that to look forward to. But now, with it being different trim, we have different seat options. These are now the high backs. These are the cheap high backs. You can see there's a lot of extra ribbing here in the center, but otherwise they are dimensionally the same. Bolsters are a little bit more defined, but again, same pans. It talks about some of these here. Deluxe sound package. I believe what they're referring to is sound deadening, not the sound system itself. GLX, so now I know they put this in front of the SS, but the GLX is the most loaded of trim options for these cars. You will find the most everything with these. So they all do have the EXP wheels, they all have the remote adjustable sport mirrors, they all have the fully optioned bumpers. So they have the extensions, they have the added center rubber stripe, they have the added white edge stripe all the way around, and then they have the two vertical strakes on top of that. And they do have unique seats compared to the others. And if you don't have cruise control, this is now your steering wheel instead of the very monolithic one spoke. Oh, I'm sorry. The GLs had the 4-spoke wheel as well, padded wheel. The EXPs, however, you would only have this wheel with cruise control. This wheel does come with cruise control on the Escorts. When you option it out, you'll see 2 chrome buttons on each side of the lower spokes. Talks about some of the bumper info we mentioned. And then one thing I didn't mention, I'll go back a tad because I see it in the GLX list. The GLs, it should say it in here, that they paint black tail lamp extensions. That's interesting. So maybe the GL tail lights for 81 are different than the base model. I don't think I'm seeing it here, but for the GLs and higher, the area behind the grille, they paint black, so they mask that off separate, paint it black. All of these, every inch of the car is the same body color, but for these, the GLXs and the SSs, they mask around the radiator, and then they paint that whole opening black. So when you look at the car, you don't see any color between the gaps of the bumper and the grill, and the grill and the hood, and the grill and the headlight bezels. It's all just black, so you can't see anything behind it. Very nice and tidy. Wood tone instrument cluster applique. So now the cluster gets fancy. It doesn't come across well in this picture here, but for the base model cars, it is a kind of gold. Maybe they call it argent. Around each of the control panels, but for the higher trims, it would be wood grain actually. Interval wipers, things like that. So the options list on this becomes very small. The option list for the GL is very big because it's a mid-tier car and you can spec it out as high as a GLX. My 81 GL wagon is spec'd out as high as a GLX. Why it's not one, I really don't know. But the only difference between mine and this one is the bumperettes, because mine is just this. The bumperettes, and then a couple of options. Like mine didn't have the EXP wheels, and like I said, some of the options I only have the mono radio. Mine does have AC and cruise control and an automatic. Mine also has a rear wiper, but mine doesn't have a tachometer gauge set, but I swapped that in. Mine also doesn't have a roof rack. Mine does have a sunroof. And no premium sound. Nothing crazy like that. And no wood grain package. I lack that as well. The SS. Here's what's special. So the SS was 1 year only 1981. And out of the, I think they sold 300,000 Escorts in the first year. We don't know how many were SS's, but it wasn't many. Wasn't many at all. Should you get a Marty report for an SS Escort, there will be one number for the wagons that were made and one number for the two-door coupes that were made. They're both awfully low. We're talking somewhere in the couple thousands. But here are each of the standout features. These are pretty unique. You can pause this here and read through them if you like, but we will show them out all here. So the trim is blacked out on all of these. So the whole grille and the headlight surrounds, they are black. It's kind of like a semi-gloss black. The entire front bumper and rear bumper are black, and they're plastic instead of being aluminum front, steel in the rear. So the bumper is way less, like a lot less. You shed a lot of pounds with those. Furthermore, all the trim around all the windows, instead of being chrome, are black. All of the sport mirrors on these are black. You can actually see, I think this one has the smoker window. That one might even too. It's hard to tell. But all of the window trim for the rest of the car, and then the B-pillar panels, those are black. And all the trim that goes around the top of the car is completely black. It stands out, and that's the only Escort ever that had blacked out trim. The only one ever. You also have black door handles and black lock keys. All the other Escorts, they're all chrome. You do still have the world emblem, but right next to that is a stylized SS. Every SS made has this SS decal, and then they'll have some number of stripes on them. But sometimes they have rub strips. But on these, just the stripes, no rub strips on these. And they all get the EXP wheels. So we're looking for any added performance parts. It mentions the front ear dam. The lower trims have that as well. And I don't know why, but the base models have that, and they say that they don't. Well, they do. It's literally right in these photos, and I had an 81L wagon. It had that. That's not something you can option on. So I really don't get what they were talking about. We'll never know. Get more black molding. Black. Bright trim rings and wheel nut covers on these. Oh yeah. Typical EXP wheel stuff. Handling suspension. Sadly, we don't really know what that entails. I'm hoping to see that later in this chapter of the binder. Deluxe sound package. Yes. So you would actually get the higher end sound system in these. I don't know if that meant they got premium sound, but they would all have stereo. But so there are a couple of S's out there that have the radio delete. That's pretty funny. Someone paid money to have the radio yanked. In a car where you paid money to have a radio in it over the other cars instead. So all the SS's, I think, have black dashboards. Black back trim, black floorboard. So maybe the dashboards could be colored. I'm hoping to find out here as I turn these pages. The only SS I've ever seen in person was a yellow two-door with a black interior. That doesn't leave me much to go off of, but it's one pristine example. One hell of a car. So here we can actually shoot out side by side each of the standard equipments, and then over the next couple pages some options. So take a look at this front air dam. Again, I don't know what they're talking about. It's on all of them. Bumpers, bright front rear, but they're black on the SS. Yep, it talks about each of the bumper end caps. Bumper rub strips are the deluxes. They come on the fancy cars. Grills, tailgates, a number of different argent lamp doors. So I believe those are just casted in silver, and then they have the bright headlamp doors, which are painted silver, and then they have the black ones, which are painted black. There are some molding options, ornamentation that are basically the same across all of the cars. Carpet, color key passenger compartments, gray load floor mat, so you get a gray carpet in the rear for the lowest cars, black for the higher ones, or you can have colored key carpets for the most high cars, only in the wagons. I should say the side are all the two doors, the side is all of the wagons. Center console, that was pretty rare. Glove box with integrated latch. Locking type can only come on the GLX. EXPs were all the locking type. Instrument panel, the bronze tone, so that's the one I said was like a silver gold color. Escort letters on the right of the dash. So only the GLX had the wood grain. Instrumentation group, this is the one that has the temp gauge and tach and tripometer. Only the SS had that as standard, but that it was optional in all of these from the L through the GLX. Passenger side vanity mirror. AM radio came in all of them. Radio delete. You either pay $25 or you get $25 back by deleting the radio. You have to be a special kind of crazy for that. And a lot of just standard functional equipment, nothing special. Here's where we get to the optional equipment. And they will they will elaborate where necessary here. Power brakes is standard on the wagon, not available on the base car, and then optional on all the other ones. So you could actually have an SS with manual brakes. That's sad. The performance car and you get manual brakes. Electric clock, standard on only the GLX across these, optional everywhere else. Center console, and that is the full console. That is not just the consolette, the tiny plastic thing, but the full console. Not available on the base car, optional on everything, but standard on the top two. We have seen a couple of 81s without the consolette even. And they came that way from the factory, so there was some sort of option to remove even the consolette. But it's pretty rare occasion seeing that. Rear defrost, pretty rare. Same with the rear wiper, if we run across that. More options. Premium sound system, optional on everything. That's worth noting because, oh, come on, focus. On the base level cars, you wouldn't be able to get premium sound in the later years, starting 82 or 83. That would be yanked from the base car. So then the base car, I don't think, could have any radio, and if you did, it would only be AM mono. Reclining front seats. The base cars do not get reclining seats. I don't know why it's striked out on the GLX. Those seats recline as well. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. Oh, I see. So because they get separate reclining low backs. That would be why. Suspension handling requires cast aluminum wheels except on the GLX. So this was at the time the TRX package, even though they didn't have TRX tires yet. Optional on everything but base. Squire wagon option. Not available on the base, L, SS, or with two-tone paint. So you could only have that on a one-paint car, whether the car was like all red, all blue, all tan, all black, like that. And then it was only available on the GLX. Oh, my apologies, and the GL. So if you had a GL, you could have that, assuming it was only the one color. Pivoting front vent windows, very rare. You can see they're only optional. They were not standardized at any point in time. Remote control quarter windows, these are also pretty rare. They are only on two-door cars. We have ran across on a couple on like GT and SS cars. Otherwise, very, very rare. Then more technical stuff. The same stuff as the EXP we showed. From engine, transmission, suspension, and steering. And then more stuff on the body. Front disc drums. So it talks about a little bit the manual versus power brakes. We will hover over that for a minute. And body features. Again, the same stuff as the EXP. Just a different photo. High level of standard functional and convenience features. I don't know about that, man. You gave us a fuel gauge, an odometer, and a speedometer gauge. That's it. There's no odometer, there's no tach, there's no temperature gauge. Just a couple of idiot lights because those were mandatory. But whatever. Talks about some of the window info, seat and door constructions. Some of the added sound deadening that's in the higher trim cars, which are all standard on the EXP. So when people whine and complain about the EXP weighing more than the base Escort, well, yeah, it's because you're comparing a high trim car to a base trim car. What do you think was going to happen? It's got more sound insulation in it. It's going to weigh more than an empty Escort. It's got more options as standard to it. It's going to weigh more than the Escort. People get way too hung up over the weight thing. Because when you compare them side by side, yeah, a two-door EXP weighs as much as an equally equipped two-door Escort. Funny that. It's so suspicious. Here's some more of that information. I believe that 10-gallon fuel tank only existed for 81, and then from 82 forward they would all have the 11-gallon, unless you had the optional 13-gallon. That would come and go for some of the trims depending on the year you're looking at. For 83 they standardized it across all EXPs. That kind of ends that. With how thorough it was, we won't shoot that out with the 82 Escort book. It's a different Escort anyways. Then we will skip ahead. They do have a tab for each of their other cars. They even have one for police vehicles and taxi services. That alone is impressive. Not too often you see that. Give it just a quick glimpse on that because that's pretty interesting, but we're not going to dig through those. Powertrains is the next tab. And they list loads of specifications for each of these. We will quickly look at the 1.6 section, talk about some emissions and, well, related things like crankcase ventilation. I consider that emissions. Engine mapping, well, all of our cars were carbureted, so there's the technical specifications on our engines. And just like that, it moves on. And so will we. Next tab is color and trim. And boy, there's a lot here. And as we get closer and closer to 83, the pinnacle year, more and more options are added. But for 83, it's the most. It's most options you could have color and interior wise in any combination you see fit. This is the chart for the Escort here. So on the top you can see the Escort, each of the bodies. So there are not really any limitations body wise, but there are limitations trim wise. So the lower trim cars only get these seats. These ones optional. The higher trim cars get these seats, with these ones optional. And then going down each, they do have each of the colors corresponded. Caramel is a very rare color. It's it kind of looks like Italian leather. That's the best way I can describe it. Very, very light tan. Caramels or caramel is a great way to describe it. But it only came in 1, 2, 3 seat types out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then there were only 3 other colors: black, medium, red, and it says just blue here, but it's Wedgwood blue. Now here's the combinations you can have depending on what trim you're looking for, and then what seats you're going after. These are the colors of those seats, and these are the exterior colors that you could have them with. And then it corresponds to your battleship chart here. Down below, these are those exterior pinstripes I mentioned. When you see, oh, I'm sorry, no, we're not there yet. These are the GLX options, so there is one more way to get caramel seats. Why they don't have this up here, I don't quite understand. And then here are your two-tone trim combinations. Here was the pinstripe I was talking about. So if you had, let's just say you had a GL wagon, And you had the metallic or the medium red interior, but your car was black. You would have what R, that should be red, right? A bright red pinstripe if you had a black car with a red interior. However, if you had an SS with a blue interior and the silver exterior, you would have a number 2. You would have the light blue SS decals, and there were only the 2 for the SS. You would have the blue, or you would have the orange and red, and it just depends on what interior color you had. But it's pretty neat. So if you see photos of any of these cars, you can identify what interior it has just based on the exterior color versus the pinstripe. Pretty fascinating. I use that as a party trick inside the forums. People will share photos, and I'm like, yes, nice 82 with the blue interior. Well, how can you tell? The photo's from 40 feet away. See that blue pinstripe? Then the book kind of moves on options and accessories. It's all just general stuff. It talks about some of what's in our cars, but not very much. We won't spend too much time on it, because like I said, it focuses more on the bigger cars that have more options, bigger options. Neat thing are Cobra Hood graphics. So for the Mustang, pretty rare. Some interior, exterior stuff. Some info on our 1.6 here. Remember I mentioned the 1.3? It showed up on that title page, but it did not show up anywhere else in the literature. Off to the side there is a few more Escort interior stuff. You can see a full instrumentation package. I know that wasn't in the other photos. We'll spend a couple moments on that. And remember how the trim surrounding the gauge cluster was in that kind of gold metallic? Well, so is the background of the cluster itself on the full instrumentation. And the 81 is unique because of that, but then also it has all these little tick marks around each of the 2 gauge sets. Whereas all the other gauges, they'll only have smaller tick marks for the tachometer, and only at 500 RPM increments. And then for the speedometer, each tick mark is much smaller. Or I should say not much smaller, but more blocky. They do talk about light groups down here at the end. And then we get to some of the more neat options. But sadly, nothing here really for the Escort. And because the EXP was so new, it didn't have anything in here either. There are dual remote mirrors offered as dealer installed, and on my base model car, I think that's what had happened, was they were installed by the dealer. It's not too hard of a job. The shaver mirrors, they come right off. These bolt in right in their place. You drill a hole in the door card. You add the special trim bezel ring for the little joystick adjuster, and then boom, you're done. The hardest part is securing one of those trim surrounds for the little adjuster joystick, because while they're extremely easy to find for the driver's side, they're very hard to find for the passenger side. because every EXP had the sport mirrors as option as standard, but the passenger side was only ever option. So that means the relationship of existence here. There are about 3 times as many driver ones as there were in passenger ones. They do mention the metallic glow paint, so special extra cost paint. For the Escort, there were only 2 colors. For everyone else, there were a few. This is the 2-tone treatment for the Escorts. It was basically just a top and a bottom. Later, that line right at the sill, that would be moved down a little further down the car, and then some would be more like this, but then swoop down at the front end of the car. They do vary some. For sound systems, you have a lot of availability, at least for 81 at least. It's like I said, they yanked some of the options on the lower trim cars in the following years. And then here's all of your radio head units. So that was in the Escort, then it was in the Escort, that was in the Escort, that was in the Escort. These digital ones, they all have an integrated electronic search function. Some of them even had integrated clocks. Full vinyl roof on the Mustang. I didn't mention that because at the time there was not yet a convertible Mustang. I have one of the only Ford EXP convertibles. That was supposed to be the first convertible Ford brought back, but cost had exceeded expectations, so they chose not to produce it. So it would have been a first for many things. It would have been the first car with blackout taillights, the LN7, first car with a bubble back, the LN7, the first car to have the blue oval back, the EXP, and then first car to bring the convertible back, which would have been both. Some of the steering wheel controls and sport options, because that involves steering wheels. So they don't show much for steering wheels on the cars. That is the Squire Wood option. Said only for the wagons and only in the one color. Mimi! And then just a whole bunch more options that these cars don't have. We get on to the wheel options, and again, not much here. Oh, here we go. So they do show one of the options for the Escort. It's one. That's another one, and I'm not seeing the EXP wheels. Probably because it was included elsewhere. Rear glass and window options. Not too many. Everything we mentioned. And then finally at the end is a small list of dealer installed accessories. Nothing too crazy. But what's cool is they actually go through and show photos of each of these. These would otherwise only be found in the little accessories, pamphlets, brochures, whatever you want to call them. But I prefer those because they are in full color. A lot of these are just generic photos of one of the random products on a random car. And they'll just say below what they're available on, like the louvers, some of the side moldings, roof racks, things like that, floor mats. A lot of roof rack options. All the wonky child seats. Tape strips. That's neat. Not often we get to see this. 1981. That's a rare sight. And this one does happen to have a section for extended service plan information. It's literally just this one card, which gets inserted inside every owner's manual for each of the cars, and then there's a competitive comparison chart. And this would normally be in a different binder, like I'd said, but there's a bunch here. And then it goes kind of like the rest of the binder, goes over how to use it. Some of the main info here. And then there's an index. EXP versus Chevrolet Corvair, Toyota Celica, Sirocco, the Datsun 200SX, and Prelude. Escort, they compare that against a bunch of stuff. And what I could tell in the prior ones, these were pretty fair comparisons. But usually because they pick cars that are a little bit below their punching class anyways. We'll just hover over a couple of these. I don't need to talk about them, but since they're here, welcome to see them. At least how they relate to our cars. Limit free lines. What's disappointing is I'm not seeing any performance comparisons. As in, they are not showing any kind of torque or horsepower figures whatsoever. Probably because on the Escort you only get, 60 or 60, I think 65 horsepower. That ain't jack. Hey, yeah, there we go. Escort even against a Rabbit. Look at that. The choice between the two, I picked the Escort. Rabbit has crap for handling, especially in the rear, the solid axle. The Escort is also a much more fancy ride. Those Volkswagens are a little bit more barbaric. And that's saying something because the Escort's pretty cheap. The EXP, and that's quite well fleshed out. Chevette, oh yeah, Chevette wagon. So many comparisons. Dodge Omni and Plymouth wagon, cool. It says 4-door hatchback. I don't know if they made a wagon, but I have seen the 4-door hatchbacks. There's the Rabbit, well, yeah, the 4-door hatchback, we can call it a wagon. And that here would be the final one. At least for the Escorts and EXPs. That was a whole lot of papers. 16 pages of comparison just between the Escorts and EXPs. And they got a whole bunch more for the other cars. Okay, here we go. There's the EXP section. I thought I had blown right over that. LPD, put in there. Due to how the binder ring is designed on this guy, these last bottom pages, they all get caught on it, and then I have to help them up over and around. Okay, man, they're in here somewhere. Here we go. So EXP versus the Cavalier. It's not exactly a comparison. They're two very different cars. But at the time, it was probably one of the closest thing between that and the Celica liftback. Because it wasn't until, what, 83 that General Motors made the Fiero. That would be the direct competitor to this. This Rock was such a cool car, though. If you didn't notice, but in the book they do highlight all the winning values is blue. All the losing values stay white. Or, you know, if they're just comparable, they stay white. Well, that does it. A couple disclaimer pages on the way back, I believe. Nope, just blank pages. Oh. And then this book, it has a final tab, major tab at least, for facts of literature, certain bulletins. So if there were any updates, you'd find them here, but these are all just completely vacant, sadly. But should I find any, I'll stick them in here. So that's that. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. No, these are not for sale. I'm going to hold on to all these here, because I do use them frequently to make comparison charts and tables. So that way everything that's in these you can access instantly for free, online even. So with that, I'll leave you guys be.